Picture this. It's 1979, disco's still alive and well, and a young woman named Kathy Hawley, just 19 years old, vanishes from a small town in Illinois for 45 years. Her family lived in a state of agonizing uncertainty, not knowing what happened to their daughter, their sister. Today, we're going to delve into Kathy's case, a story of enduring hope, the relentless pursuit of justice, and the remarkable power of advancements in DNA technology.
What's striking about this case is that it really highlights how much forensic science has evolved over the decades. It's a journey from the era of blood typing and fingerprint analysis to the cutting-edge world of DNA phenotyping and genetic genealogy.
We're going to examine original police reports, witness statements, and the compelling personal account of Detective Ryan Peete, the man who refused to let Kathy's case fade into obscurity.
This is a story for anyone who's ever been captivated by a true crime mystery, but also for anyone who's ever felt the profound weight of unanswered questions. Kathy's story reminds us that even after decades, the truth can emerge from the shadows.
So, let's rewind back to March 29th, 1979. Kathy Hawley, a recent high school graduate, is working at a record shop, living with her sister, sharing a car, just starting her adult life. It's a Thursday night, and Kathy's supposed to pick up her sister from her job at the grocery store. In the Northgate Shopping Plaza, she leaves her apartment around 9 p.m., and that's the last time anyone sees her.
Here's where the story takes a chilling turn. An hour passes. Kathy doesn't arrive at the grocery store. Her sister calls their parents. No one's heard from her. This is completely out of character for Kathy, and her family immediately senses that something is terribly wrong.
Driven by a mother's intuition and a father's fierce love, Kathy's family starts retracing her steps, desperately searching for any sign of her. They find her car back at their apartment complex, but something's amiss.
It's not just that her car is there, it's the state of the car that sends a shiver down their spines. The windows are down, the interior has been ransacked, and most disturbingly, there's a pool of blood in the backseat.
The discovery of blood transforms this from a missing persons case to something far more sinister, and it gets even more unsettling. A family member searching the complex stumbles upon Kathy's purse on the roof of one of the buildings. It's intact. Not like it was simply emptied and discarded.
This detail is crucial. It suggests a deliberate act, perhaps an attempt to hide evidence or even taunt the investigators.
The family knows at this point that something horrific has happened. They contact the police, who arrive and begin processing the scene.
It's important to remember that this is 1979. DNA analysis as we know it today is still a distant concept. Investigators are relying on blood typing, fingerprints, and traditional detective work to piece together what happened.
They meticulously photograph the scene, collect the blood evidence, and start interviewing people in the area, hoping someone saw something, anything, that could shed light on Kathy's disappearance.
Naturally, police focus on those closest to Kathy, including her boyfriend. He claims to have an alibi for the time Kathy vanished, but a shadow of suspicion falls upon him when he later attempts suicide.
This act, while not directly implicating him, fuels speculation in the community. Was it a guilty conscience? Or a reaction to the trauma of Kathy's disappearance?
Despite the swirling rumors, the police maintain that he is not a suspect, at least not officially.
Meanwhile, detectives are diligently canvassing the neighborhood, hoping to find someone who might have witnessed something unusual that night.
And they get a lead. A resident of the apartment complex tells police he saw a car matching Kathy's description, speeding erratically through the parking lot around the time she disappeared. He recalls seeing a man behind the wheel and a woman in the passenger seat who looked directly at him with an expression of sheer terror.
This eyewitness account could be the break they've been hoping for, but there's a twist. When police follow up with the witness, he backtracks, claiming he can't be certain it was Kathy's car.
It's almost as if fear has silenced him, and that fear seems justified when we learn that his car headlights were smashed the very day after he spoke to the police.
It's a chilling detail that raises a question. Was someone trying to intimidate him into silence? Was this a sign that someone involved in Kathy's disappearance had connections to the community and was willing to use fear to protect themselves?
It certainly adds a layer of complexity and menace to the investigation. It suggests that there are forces at play that extend beyond a simple disappearance.
While police are pursuing these leads, Kathy's family isn't giving up hope. Her father, who works for the Federal Aviation Administration, takes matters into his own hands, organizing aerial searches using airplanes to scan the Fox River and the surrounding areas. They're clinging to the hope that she's still alive, that she's somewhere out there waiting to be found.
Weeks stretch into a month, and on April 24th, a fisherman on the Fox River makes a grim discovery. That shatters the family's hope. A young woman's body is found about a mile from Kathy's apartment. The body is so badly decomposed that immediate identification is impossible.
It's a heart-wrenching moment when Kathy's father is called to the morgue. Even he, driven by a father's desperate need to recognize his daughter, struggles to make a positive identification due to the condition of the body.
The clothing description matches what Kathy was wearing that night, and eventually, through a combination of dental records and blood typing, the body is confirmed to be Kathy Hawley's.
It's a devastating confirmation, a crushing blow to the family who had been holding on to a sliver of hope. But this is just the beginning of their long journey for answers. What happened to Kathy in those missing weeks? Who was responsible for her death?
An autopsy reveals the horrifying truth. Kathy was brutally murdered. Bruising on her face suggests she was punched. A puncture wound on her neck indicates a possible weapon like an ice pick. And lacerations on her mouth indicate she bit through her lip, likely as a result of being struck.
The cause of death.
Strangulation.
So, we have a young woman, her life tragically cut short, her case shrouded in mystery, despite the evidence collected from the car, the purse, and the autopsy. The investigation hits a wall, no clear suspects emerge, and the case goes cold.
It's a frustrating reality of many cold cases. You have the evidence, you have the victim. But the puzzle pieces just don't seem to fit together. And for years, Kathy's case remains unsolved. But the story doesn't end there. Time marches on. Technology advances. And as we'll see, those advancements will play a pivotal role in Kathy's story.
This is where the story takes a turn, and we begin to see the impact of forensic science on cold cases. Stay with us, because in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore how the emergence of DNA fingerprinting and the relentless pursuit of justice bring Kathy's case back from the cold.
If you're finding this deep dive as compelling as we are, be sure to subscribe to the deep dive for more captivating stories like this one. We'll be back in a moment to continue unraveling this complex case.
We left off with Kathy's case going cold, a heartbreaking end to the initial investigation. But as we move into the 21st century, new possibilities emerge in the realm of forensic science.
You're right. The emergence of DNA fingerprinting in the 1980s truly revolutionized criminal investigation. It provided a level of accuracy and individual identification that traditional methods, like blood typing, simply couldn't match.
So, how does this new technology impact Kathy's case?
By the early 2000s, DNA technology had advanced enough to allow for the retesting of evidence from cold cases. Investigators saw an opportunity to potentially crack open Kathy's case, to find that missing piece of the puzzle.
And did they find anything promising?
They did. When they re-examined the evidence from Kathy's case using DNA analysis, they discovered a mixture of DNA profiles, indicating that male DNA was present on some of the items.
That must have been a significant breakthrough, finally having a tangible lead after all those years.
It was a glimmer of hope, for sure. However, there were still challenges. The technology at that time wasn't sophisticated enough to completely separate the mixed DNA profiles, or to obtain a clear match to any individuals in existing databases.
So close, yet so far. It must have been incredibly frustrating for everyone involved.
It was. They even tested the DNA of Kathy's boyfriend and her boss, hoping for a match. But to no avail. The case went cold once again. The mystery's still unsolved.
But then, a seemingly unrelated case in a nearby town breathes new life into Kathy's story.
This is where the investigation takes a fascinating turn. 10 miles from North Aurora, in the town of Lisle, Illinois, police are reinvestigating the 1976 murder of 16-year-old Pam Mao. Her case, like Kathy's, had grown cold, but investigators were determined to use every available tool to find her killer.
What was different about their approach this time? What allowed them to make progress in Pam's case after all these years?
They turned to cutting-edge DNA technologies, specifically DNA phenotyping and genetic genealogy. These techniques offered a way to analyze DNA samples and predict physical characteristics of the individual, essentially creating a genetic sketch of the unknown suspect.
It sounds like something out of science fiction. Can you explain a little bit about how DNA phenotyping works?
Imagine taking a DNA sample and using it to predict someone's eye color, hair color, skin tone, even facial structure. That's what DNA phenotyping does. It analyzes specific genetic markers to create a picture of what the person might look like.
So in Pam's case, did they use this genetic sketch to identify a suspect?
Not directly, but it was a crucial step. They combined the DNA phenotyping results with genetic genealogy, which uses DNA databases to trace family trees and identify potential relatives of the unknown suspect.
It's like piecing together a puzzle using DNA as the clues.
Exactly. And through meticulous analysis and cross-referencing, they were able to identify a man named Bruce Lindell, who had died in 1981 as Pam's killer.
Wait, the suspect was already deceased? That must have added another layer of complexity to the case.
It did. But the identification of Lindahl was a major breakthrough, not only for Pam's case, but potentially for others as well, you see. Lindahl had a disturbing history of violence against women, and some of those incidents occurred in the very area where Kathy lived and worked.
So, there's a potential connection between this deceased killer and Kathy's unsolved case.
This is where things start to get really intriguing.
Yes. And remember, Lindahl didn't just die of natural causes. He died while committing another murder, stabbing a man named Charles Huber multiple times in 1981.
It sounds like we're dealing with a potentially very dangerous and violent individual.
During the investigation into Huber's murder, police searched Lindahl's residence and found hundreds of photographs, many of them depicting young women, in compromising and disturbing positions.
So, we have a deceased killer linked to at least 2 murders, with a collection of disturbing photos. It's a chilling thought. And to make matters even more unsettling, a year before his death, in 1980, a young woman reported that Lindahl had sexually assaulted her.
That assault occurred at the Northgate Shopping Plaza, the same place where Kathy worked. The victim managed to escape, but she disappeared just weeks before she was scheduled to testify against Lindahl. Her name was Deborah Collender. Sadly, 2 years later, her skeletal remains were found. While they couldn't conclusively link Lindahl to her death at the time, the circumstances are incredibly suspicious.
Absolutely. Given this troubling pattern of violence against women, the connection to the Northgate area, and the disturbing photographs, investigators in Kathy's case felt a surge of both hope and determination. Could this be the answer they had been seeking for so long?
It seems like all signs point to Lindahl. But how do they definitively prove his involvement in Kathy's case?
They needed a direct link, a concrete piece of evidence. They needed to compare Lindahl's DNA to the male DNA profile found on the evidence from Kathy's case.
But there's a catch, isn't there? Didn't you mention earlier that the DNA samples from Kathy's case were degraded?
You're right. The fact that Kathy's body had been submerged in the Fox River for weeks significantly impacted the quality of the DNA evidence. Initial attempts to compare Lindahl's DNA to the evidence from Kathy's case were inconclusive. The samples were simply too degraded to provide a reliable match.
So what could they do? Was this another dead end?
This is where Detective Ryan Peet enters the story. A man driven by a deep sense of commitment to solving cold cases and bringing closure to families who have endured years of unanswered questions.
What sets Detective Peet apart? What makes him so dedicated to these cold cases?
It's more than just a job for him. He understands the profound impact these unsolved cases have on families, the weight of uncertainty they carry. He wants to give them answers, to help them find peace.
So what does Detective Peet do when faced with this obstacle of degraded DNA evidence?
He refuses to give up. He learns about a new DNA extraction technique called MVAC, a technology specifically designed to be more effective on degraded samples.
Can you tell us a little more about this MVAC technique? What makes it different from traditional DNA extraction methods?
Think of it like this. Traditional DNA extraction methods are like using a sponge. To collect DNA from a surface, you might get some, but you'll also miss a lot. MVAC is more like a powerful vacuum cleaner, designed to capture even the smallest traces of DNA from a larger area.
So, it's not just collecting more DNA, it's collecting DNA that might have been missed by other methods.
Exactly. And because it's so effective on degraded samples, it offered a glimmer of hope for Kathy's case.
But I imagine there were still challenges. This new technology, the MVAC, wasn't widely available, was it?
You're right. To use the MVAC, they had to send the evidence to a private lab in Florida, and that came with a hefty price tag, around $9,000.
That's a significant amount of money. Did they have the resources for that?
And it wasn't just about the money. There were logistical hurdles as well. They had to ensure a seamless chain of custody for the evidence, meaning they had to meticulously document every step of the process to guarantee its integrity and admissibility in court.
I can see how that would be critical, especially in a case with such a long history.
Absolutely. And to add to the complexity, they needed to make sure the testing met the standards for the FBI's CODIS database, the Combined DNA Index System, which allows law enforcement agencies to share and compare DNA profiles.
It sounds like there were layers upon layers of complexity. But Detective Peet, being the dedicated investigator he is, didn't let these obstacles deter him.
Not at all. Undeterred, he secured a grant from Seasons of Justice, a nonprofit organization dedicated to funding DNA testing in cold cases.
Seasons of Justice, an organization that steps in to help bridge the gap. When resources are limited, what a crucial role they play in these investigations.
They're a lifeline for so many families seeking answers. And with the grant secured, Detective Pete personally drove the evidence all the way to Florida, ensuring its safe arrival at the lab.
Talk about dedication. Driving evidence across multiple states to make sure it's handled properly. It speaks volumes about his commitment to this case.
It's a testament to his unwavering belief that even the coldest of cases can be solved. But even with the evidence in the hands of the experts, the waiting game began. The lab estimated a processing time of 6 to 8 months.
So, more waiting. More uncertainty for Kathy's family. Did they receive the results within that time frame?
Unfortunately, no. A whole year passed, 14 long months filled with anticipation and anxiety.
And then, what happened? Did the lab finally contact Detective Pete with the results?
Here's where the story takes an almost cinematic turn. Picture this. It's August of 2024, and Detective Pete is on a well-deserved vacation with his family in Montana. They're hiking in the mountains, enjoying the breathtaking scenery, and suddenly, in a remote spot with limited cell service, his phone rings.
That must have been an unexpected interruption to his vacation.
It was, and on the other end of the line was the DNA expert he'd been working with.
What a moment.
Yeah.
After a year of waiting, he finally gets the call, and in the most unlikely of settings. What did the DNA expert tell him?
He delivered news that sent chills down Detective Pete's spine and brought a surge of relief and validation. The DNA from Kathy's evidence matched Bruce Lindell, and the odds of it belonging to someone else, an astronomical one in 9.4 trillion.
An incredible moment of closure, not just for Detective Pete, but for Kathy's family, who had endured decades of unanswered questions and agonizing uncertainty.
It was a victory for science, for perseverance, and for the pursuit of justice. And it's a story that's not over yet. Join us in part 3. As we delve into the aftermath of this discovery, the impact on Kathy's family, and the questions that still linger.
We left off with that incredible news that after 45 years, Kathy Hawley's family finally had an answer. Bruce Lindell, a man who had already been linked to the murder of another young woman, was now definitively connected to Kathy's death.
It was a bittersweet victory. While it provided a sense of closure, it also brought back the pain of their loss and the realization that justice, in the traditional sense, was no longer possible.
What was it like for Kathy's family to finally receive this confirmation after all those years of not knowing?
Imagine carrying the weight of that uncertainty for 45 years, wondering what happened, who was responsible. When Detective Pete and another detective met with the Hawley family to share the news, it was an emotionally charged moment, filled with a mix of relief
Good grief.
and anger.
It's hard to even fathom the complex emotions they must have experienced. Was there a sense that this news, while devastating in its confirmation, also lifted a burden?
Absolutely. For some, there was a sense of peace in finally knowing, in having a name and a face to attach to the tragedy. The not knowing, the endless speculation, can be a heavy weight to bear.
And remember Kathy's boyfriend, the one who lived under a cloud of suspicion, who even attempted suicide in the aftermath of her disappearance. How did he react to the news?
For him, it was a moment of profound vindication. He had carried the guilt and the weight of that suspicion for decades. The news of Lindell's connection to Kathy's death lifted that burden, offering a sense of closure and release he had longed for.
It's a reminder that the impact of these cases extends far beyond the immediate family, touching the lives of friends, loved ones, even entire communities.
Precisely. Kathy's case became a part of the fabric of North Aurora. It left a scar on the community, a sense of unease and unresolved grief. While Lindell could not be prosecuted posthumously, the confirmation of his involvement brought a sense of collective healing, allowing the community to move forward, to remember Kathy without the shadow of an unknown perpetrator.
It's remarkable how advancements in DNA technology have transformed the landscape of cold case investigations, giving hope to families who thought they might never know the truth.
Kathy's case is a testament to the power of science and perseverance. It shows that even when years, even decades have passed, the truth can still emerge.
But it also makes you wonder, if Lindell was responsible for Kathy's death, what other unsolved cases might he be connected to?
That's a chilling thought, and one that investigators are actively exploring. Remember, Lindell had a history of violence against women. He was linked to Deborah Collander's disappearance, and they found those disturbing photographs at his residence.
Are there specific cases that investigators are focusing on?
They're particularly interested in unsolved cases involving young women found strangled in the river, cases with similarities to Kathy's. It's a haunting possibility, but one that they are determined to pursue. Solving one cold case can often lead to the resolution of others, bringing a sense of justice and peace to more families.
So even though Kathy's case is closed, The investigation into Bruce Lindole's crimes is far from over.
And that's the thing about cold cases. They have a way of rippling outward, impacting lives and communities in ways we might not fully comprehend.
Kathy's story is a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope can endure, and the pursuit of truth should never be abandoned.
It also underscores the importance of organizations like Seasons of Justice, who step in to provide resources and support for families and law enforcement agencies, working tirelessly to solve these cold cases.
It's inspiring to see how advancements in science and the dedication of people like Detective Pete are bringing answers and a sense of closure to families who have lived for years with the pain of the unknown. It's a testament to the human spirit's unwavering desire to seek justice and find meaning, even in the face of tragedy.
If you're as moved by this story as we are, we encourage you to consider supporting organizations like Seasons of Justice. Every contribution, no matter how small, can make a difference in helping to solve these cold cases and bring peace to families who've waited far too long for answers.
And if you've enjoyed this deep dive into Kathy Holly's case, be sure to subscribe to the deep dive for more captivating stories like this one. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and never stop seeking the truth.